July night before the town went west. Jack and Coke in your mama's car. You were reading the bell jar. Where are you if you're not on your own? Always lonely, never quite alone. Where's the Jesus that you swore you'd find after running the last line?
Hi, Mandy. Welcome, Becky.
Are you living the life you chose? Are you living the life that chose you?
Get started in just a moment, folks. Our panelists.
Are you taking the grown-up dose? Do you live with a man who knows?
Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat.
But I guess I never did. Did I, kid? And I got lucky when I finished school.
I'm lost. I lost it.
Lost 3 fingers to a faulty tool.
Welcome, John.
Settle out, court, I'm no one.
We're gonna
Probably you.
go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us who you are, where you're calling in from, any affiliation you want to share. And welcome back to our final session of the day. I am so excited to introduce you to our afternoon session. We want to first thank the Sycamore Fund at the Foundation for Appalachian Kentucky. They've sponsored this year's festival that has brought you the last 3 days of incredible programming, including this panel. This is a session that's going to focus on the vital role of community organizing in supporting individuals in recovery from substance use disorder. Participants are going to learn how to mobilize grassroots efforts, harness local resources, and advocate for policies that promote healing and reintegration. And it is my pure delight to introduce you to today's facilitator, Mandi Fugate Sheffel. Mandi was born and raised in Red Fox, Kentucky. She is a graduate of Eastern Kentucky University and is currently the Sycamore Fund Project Coordinator at the Foundation for Appalachian Kentucky in Hazard. She also serves as the board chair of the Mountain Association. Mandi is also the owner and operator of the best little bookstore this side of the Mississippi, the Red Spotted Newt in Hazard, Kentucky. And if you don't know already, Mandi is also an immensely talented writer. Her personal essays and opinion pieces can be found in Still, the Journal, Lexington Herald Leader, and the Courier Journal. Her forthcoming personal essay collection, The Nature of Pain, will be released in 2025. I think it's in October, right, Mandi? This fall, coming up soon, from the University Press of Kentucky, and I'll be dropping the link in the chat momentarily so you can pre-order that. And finally, a fun fact about Mandi, she is a Jason Isbell super fan and has been to 18 shows and counting. I'm fortunate and grateful to call Mandi a friend, and I have learned so much from her over the years, especially from her compassion and spirit approaching community building, harm reduction, recovery, and healing work. Mandi is a person who is going to get it done and have fun while doing it, and creating an inclusive environment of joy and belonging everywhere she goes. So Mandi, thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to turn it on over to you, friend.
Thank you, Laura. That was a beautiful introduction. And I may add that Jason Isbell fact to my bio, because I didn't know how much I needed that until you said that. And I'm like, that's a fun fact. So I'll get started by introducing our panelists today, who are a combination of Sycamore grantees and partners. I was going to kind of hang till Gwen got in the room. I don't know where Gwen is. She's lingering backstage. So we'll start with John Bowman. John Bowman is an individual with profound journey of personal transformation, having overcome 24 years of substance use. He marked a significant turning point on October the 12th, 2018, when he embraced a life of recovery. The milestone led him to dedicated service in the fields of recovery and criminal justice reform. John currently serves as the Kentucky Senior Campaign Organizer for Dream.org, a nationally renowned nonprofit organization of championing criminal justice reform. In his role, he works to reshape drug policies in Kentucky by actively engaging with directly impacted individuals, harm reduction specialists, law enforcement agencies, and the business sector and faith community. So, welcome, John.
Thanks, man.
And yeah, no problem. Also on the panel today, we have Gwen Johnson. Gwen was raised in the co-camp of Hemp Hill, Kentucky. She is co-director of the Hemp Hill Community Center in Jackhorn. She's had a lifetime of being a disruptor and community organizer. She is a Mamaw mentor and is a manager and director of Black Sheep Bakery, Black Sheep Brick Oven Bakery and Catering. The bakery is a second chance employment for those emerging from incarceration and recovery. Thank you, Gwen, for being with us today. Last but not least, Becky Rose Bowman. Becky is a dedicated advocate, recovery leader, and cultural organizer committed to amplifying the voices of underrepresented individuals across Appalachia. Drawing from her own lived experience of addiction and long-term recovery, she has built a career grounded in service, storytelling, and community connection. Becky currently serves with Apple Shop, a nationally recognized cultural institution based in Eastern Kentucky, where she manages the Calls from Home program. I want to thank you guys again for joining us here today to talk about work that is extremely important in our region. And I think anybody who's with us today knows the impact that substance use disorder and the subsequent policing our way out of that problem, how that's impacted our region and what that looks like. So I want to hear about individually, I'd like for everybody to talk a little bit about their work. For those who may not be familiar, and we can start with John. You can tell us what a senior campaign organizer exactly does for Dream.org.
Okay, well, a lot of things. So I do community organizing across the state of Kentucky. I work with partners from Pikeville to the end of Fulton County in the Mississippi. So, you know, the all 120 counties. And it's just me. Also do lobbying. I work on legislation. I have an amazing team that I get to work with. We work with directly impacted individuals, you know, folks who have been through the justice system. And also in Kentucky, the majority of the folks that I work with are folks in long-term recovery. And that's in every facet of my work through community organizing, whether it be lobbying, you know, writing legislation, whatever that may be. I always try to work with the folks that I consider my community, and that is the folks in, you know, recovery, folks who have been incarcerated, and folks who want to change the world. So I love being in community with folks who are like-minded, but also work with unlikely allies, and that is one of the main pillars of the work that we do at Dream. We don't care to work with opposition. If it's going to change the lives, if it's going to better the lives of our fellow Americans, and for me, my fellow Kentuckians, then I'm willing to work with anyone. And it doesn't matter, you know, if you're left, right, or center, I don't care. If you're willing to work with me to get folks out of prison, to get folks the help they need, whether it be with substance use or mental health, then I'm willing to work with you. We don't have to be best friends to better the lives of other folks. And, you know, I don't need that echo chamber. I need that opposition because it helps me better the work that I do. So that's a little bit about the work that I do here at Dream. I also work in a few other states, but Kentucky is my primary focus, and that's why it's the first word in my title. So thank you very much for having me today, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Cool. Thank you for that, John. All right, Becky, can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do? Oh, you're muted, Becky.
It said I could use my space bar, but it lied. Okay.
There you go.
So I'm Becky Rose Bowman. I'm married to the wonderful John Bowman. But I'm the restorative radio coordinator for Appleshop. I currently manage the Calls from Home program, which is a call-in shout-out program where loved ones can reach out and dedicate music, send shout-outs to their loved ones who are incarcerated in a particular set of prisons in the Appalachian Mountain Range. Our radio signal reaches 7 of those prisons, notably Wallens Ridge, Red Onion, and King Mountain in Virginia. So I, manage that program and broadcast that on Monday nights from 7 to 9. I also manage a free 2 grant with Appleshop. Currently, we are uplifting the voices of people of color in Appalachian communities around substance use disorder and recovery, and really just working to break that stigma and the shame culture, I think, that surrounds it. So, but yeah, that's a good old chunk of what I do. Also, grateful to be here. Thankful for this invitation, and really, really excited to have this conversation.
Thank you, Becky, again. Well, I'll talk a little bit about Sycamore while we wait on. Looks like Gwen got disconnected, so we'll wait on her. So the Sycamore project is a grant making initiative, and we also work in organizing to. Our main focus is reducing imprisonment rates in Central Appalachia and addressing the root causes like the criminalization of substance use, poverty, economic decline, and the lack of community services. So we look for other folks doing the work in communities and find ways to make them safer and what that means. So that's a little bit about Sycamore and the work that I do. So you guys touched on a lot of the things that I hope to get into today, and questions surrounding how we do this work, what it looks like, how we get community partners together, how we fund this work, what it looks like to organize and use, make sure that people that have lived experience are in the room. And stigma, how we redefine what it means to be in recovery and what that looks like. So those are a few of the things I hope to get into today. I think any one of those could probably be a full webinar on its own. So we'll try to touch on a little of everything. And as we go, if you guys have questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll try to leave some time at the end to focus on questions that folks might have about what it will look like to do this in their community. So I think I'll start with you, John, because I think this question probably closely aligns with your work. Can you talk to me a little bit about what it looks like to build coalitions and partnerships, specifically between like recovery orgs, local government, and community? Because I know you're involved in a lot of the happenings in Frankfort. So if you could touch on a little of what that looks like for you in building those coalitions and partnerships.
Yeah, I was just talking about this yesterday. I happen to be out in California at the moment, and me and my boss were going through this yesterday about building coalitions and why the importance of it. And for me, for the work that I do in Kentucky, we need that people power, and that's what a coalition does. It's organizing 101. You're just bringing folks together around the cause. And for me, the best coalitions have folks from every angle of this issue, whatever issue may be, as part of it. So all of my coalitions, I like to get folks, that a lot of folks would consider opposition to be a part of it, because I think it gives it a very strong piece that a lot of coalitions won't have, because it is that opposition piece. But I like to know what my opposition is thinking and how to counteract their arguments. One of my colleagues always says that, the best thing you can do for policy is know what the other side's best argument is and start working on a way to fix it and neutralize it. So that's what we do. And when you get a good coalition, you have folks from both sides, left and right. You have folks that, black, white, brown, purple, pink, don't matter. I try to work with folks in recovery as well as law enforcement, which is definitely a weird combination, as someone who is formerly incarcerated and who spent most of my adult life in active addiction. Working with law enforcement went against every fiber of my being, especially law enforcement from my hometown. So that made it really weird. The first time I walked in their police department to work with them, I did not know there was a lobby, and I did not know I could walk back out. And that is a true story, because the only time I'd ever been in there was to do a Sally port. So, just goes to show you can turn your life around. But yeah, I work with those guys in coalition as well. But I love to have their opinion on things, because their perspective on the same issue that I want to work on is completely different than mine. Their perspective on substance use disorder and mental health. It's very important because they're the ones they're usually the first touch point for a lot of folks when it comes to those things, unfortunately. And it shouldn't be that way, but that's the way our system is right now. And having that voice, as well as those folks in recovery, as well as, the harm reduction experts, as well as community leaders. And if I can get an elected official to chime in, I want their opinion too, because they're the ones who make policy. So before I ever build out my coalitions, I sit down and I power map this out. Like, who needs to be a part of this? Who needs to be who do I need to be in collaboration with on this, and who has the most power in their voice when it comes to this, that is going to be able to get the ear and the hearts and minds of the folks that are making policies, or who are going to be able to make the change that we want. And that's the folks that I try to be in community with and build coalitions with. So, it's not always popular. And folks wonder why I work with the folks that I do. It's because those are the folks that can help me make the change that I need. And they're willing to work with me. So again, I'm willing to work with them. I don't count anybody out. And, I think that's the beauty of a coalition is it can be super powerful, but you also have to be very careful, because if you make it too large and give too much, you delegate too much stuff out, you're never going to get anything done. It's going to be super counterproductive. So you have to be, it's an art form, and it's a delicate balance, but it's definitely a super piece to organizing, especially like in Kentucky, where we have a super majority and it's so rural, and just getting folks together. And, those coalition partners can reach folks that I can't, they're going to be able to talk to folks that I can't. So, that's why it's important to work with those unlikely folks that are willing to work with you. So yeah, that's my take on coalitions. We can go into a 4-hour long discussion if you would like to, but I don't have that PowerPoint with me, but I can get it if you need it. That's all I'm saying.
So yes, please contact John for further information about coalition building. Unfortunately, we do not have 4 hours. But, I think about in some of the work that Sycamore's doing around the community hubs. And for those that are probably not familiar with what's happening in the Kentucky River Health District, they have an initiative of community resource centers. I hate to call them recovery hubs, because I feel like in Eastern Kentucky, a lot of what the needs of folks in recovery are also the needs of our community members. Lots of people are struggling right now with all time, with a hot meal. And that's not just the people who have found themselves on the streets or people that are in recovery or active addiction. I mean, these are just needs of our community. So all that to say, when I look at these hubs that started in Lee County and are really based on the continuum of care, so everything from syringe exchange all the way through to finding treatment, to documentation that you need if you're coming out of incarceration or treatment, driver's license, birth certificate, if you want to go back to school, there's a representative from the community college there. So it's really just meeting people where they are across the board, and building out these hubs and trying to get one in all the counties of the Kentucky River region. We're starting steering committees to guide this work, to make sure that community partners are in the room. So we've dealt with a whole lot of what you're talking about, John, where you make sure that people with lived experience are in the room. And I have a question on that, and we'll get to that later about how important that is. As three people sitting here in recovery that are doing this work, and what that means to be an advocate for maybe those that don't have a voice right now. And so when we get those steering committees together, there are the faith communities are in the room, law enforcement's in the room, obviously, the health department, which is a government agency, and what that looks like, and how really when we get all those partners in the room, how more impactful this work is, and how it strengthens what we're trying to do, and it's not as siloed, because I feel like, prior to Sycamore and coming into this work, it felt really siloed. Like all the counties were doing their work individually, and there was a replication of resources, instead of folks being like, okay, we don't do that here, but I can direct you here to someone who does. And the hesitancy on people to do that, to refer people to another resource, which is insane to me, that it's like, well, we don't offer that, but to be willing to say, we don't offer that, but this organization does. And, we can't talk about this without talking about how treatment and recovery is highly profitable, and what that's looked like in our state. Some organizations have taken advantage of that profitability of folks in treatment. We won't get into that, but so I think that's you have to be careful. You have to be careful about who you get in the room, and how that expands, like John was talking about. And you mentioned finding yourself incarcerated during your use. And a lot of folks, that happens. A lot of folks do, because I think we're about 25 or 30 years deep in this opioid epidemic at this point, and policing our way out of it has been the answer for a long time. It's obviously not a solution. It's not helped, but it was all we had and all we knew. And I think I'm seeing initiatives now that are much more productive than that. But along that line of thinking, I was thinking about the work that Becky does and how important it is with the calls from home. And Becky, I'd like for you to talk a little bit more about calls from home and why that's so important, because maybe people who are not familiar with a population that have found themselves incarcerated due to whatever reason, doesn't even have to be substance use disorder. But I think people don't understand the inner workings of prisons in our region. And, why can't a family member just call them on the phone? Why is calls from home so important?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. So glad. All right. So,
My job.
and look, coming into doing this kind of work from working in a treatment center and in the recovery field has been a huge learning curve. I have never been in prison. I have loved people who have been in prison, but I didn't really have a close relationship that required me to, maintain those bonds and communicate. Excuse me. But what I've learned in this work is that, like, whatever I thought about prison, whatever I saw on TV about prison, is not what prison is really like, because it's worse. So whatever you saw on Oz, it's worse than that. I discovered that a lot of these folks, these are Red Onion in particular is a supermax prison. So a lot of these folks, like when they send photos or their family members will send me photos and things like that, you see that they're in like dog cages. It looks like a kennel in there. And depending on your level of security, Red Onion being a supermax prison, it's the highest security. So there are folks in there who have been in solitary confinement for years. A lot of those folks have, been inside so long that all of their family has passed. All of their people that they do have live, they've been transported to Red Onion from other states. So they're very far away from their families. Depending on your level of security, that determines how many phone calls you can have a month, how many video visits, if you get in-person visits or not. But the majority of the people that I try to serve, that I'm lucky and grateful that I get to do this, they don't really have connection with their families. They don't have phone calls and those sorts of things. And so this radio show, it kind of started out because a child wanted to say their ABCs, right? For their dad. And so it's become this thing for me anyway, and I'm relatively new to the space, like I said, but it's become this thing where I feel like I'm almost a conduit from like West Coast Kimmy in California and her husband at Red Onion, and like the creative ways that I have discovered that these spouses use to stay connected to their family members and things like that. Just the amount of just genius it takes to accomplish that is beyond me. They teach me way more than I could ever bring, I think, to the table. But so as far as the Calls from Home program goes, like that is I guess the best description I think I can come up with as far as like what that looks like to me from the studio or from the JPay account. But there are all these families that are suffering in there. And when I say suffering, I mean, if you accidentally mess up on a video visit, you lose your visits for 3 years. You don't just lose yours, you lose your kids too. So there is a certain, policy and just the way that things are done and run, and there's no accountability that I can tell for staff inside the prison. I hear a lot of terrible, terrible things that come out of there, but I'm also like, I get to be, the audience for the beautiful things that come out of there too.
Thank you, Becky. Yeah, that's, I just don't think people realize. I mean, I don't realize, I wasn't, thank goodness I wasn't incarcerated as a result of my active use. And so I think whether we're looking at folks who are incarcerated or out in the general population, I think it's how important community is to the work that we do in long-term and recovery. And so I think about, and I'll open this up to either one of you, what role you think community plays in organizing. And I'm thinking about in particular the Letcher prison fight that we're involved in at Sycamore, and there's a whole conversation to be had about how prisons have suddenly become the economic solution to the downturn of coal in our region, and how we've ended up with this number of prisons in our region, and how we know that's not true. I mean, we've seen the stats from particularly, I think maybe the one in Clay County was one of one that I saw stats on where, Clay County, Kentucky is one of the poorest counties in the nation. And this federal prison was supposed to be the answer to that, was supposed to be the answer to, it's going to come in, it's going to bring all these jobs, and how we know that in fact is not true. Oh, now we've lost Becky. So, so I think about the role community plays in folks who are in recovery, and the work that we do, what that looks like to provide spaces to build that community. Welcome back, Gwen.
Thank you.
So I think if you're ready, Gwen, I'd like to hear about the work that you do, because I think you have a space there that is beautiful for bringing community together. So can you talk a little bit about what Black Sheep is, and also the Hemp Hill Community Center?
Yeah, so at the downturn of the co-industry, it looked like we were going to have to shut the doors on the community center. And I had a nephew that was coming out of incarceration at the time, and he and I had been communicating about making sourdough bread. And he was all excited. We were planning on baking. So it looked like we were going to have to shut down the center, and by now the leaves would have been blowing through the place. So I volunteered with the board to buy the flour and the salt and the ingredients if they would allow us to experiment with making bakery products. And so that's kind of how Black Sheep Bakery began. And so over the course of the last almost 8 years, we have had about 40 folks in recovery who have come through here and worked at the bakery. Some of them have went on and transitioned into other jobs. Some of them have went back to school and are still moonlighting here. We've got some that are, we've got one that's a peer counselor now, is her, one of her jobs, but she still moonlights with us. So, Black Sheep Bakery is a social enterprise, and we're a DBA of Hemp Hill Community Center. And so this place is kind of the meeting space for a lot of different factions of, or facets of the community, if you will. And so we just, through creativity and acceptance and support and all the things, we work diligently here to try to give a sober environment for those who are looking for one, because if they go back to the same place that they've always been, they'll relapse. And so that's just kind of one of the roles that we play here at Hemp Hill Community Center.
Thanks, Gwen. Yeah, and I would highly recommend to anybody on this call, or will view this call in the future, to check out Black Sheep, because it's pretty amazing. Not only is it a great community building environment, but they make a mean scone too. So lots of benefits of Black
Thank
Sheep.
you.
Apparently they make some mean chicken and dumplings and biscuits and gravy too. And
I
you can
can't
find
speak
that
to
out
that,
in
but
September.
Yep,
I
we
can
do all
speak to
that too.
and I think about, so the scope of what it looks like going forward for our region to address the needs of folks with substance use disorder or who are formerly incarcerated. Just hearing like all of us talk and how we're approaching that in different ways. I mean, I think the goal is common, but I look at all the work that we're doing, and it's just so many different sectors. And I don't know. It's just, I don't know why I hadn't realized that before now, but I'm like, we're all approaching this work in such different ways, but we're all passionate about the same thing. And so, I get a lot of hope out of what's going to happen, how we treat this disease in the future and what it looks like. Because what we have done really hasn't worked all that well. I mean, you got 3 examples here of people who found their way out, but I think one of the things that has to be mentioned here is the opioid abatement settlement funds. One, because it's like the thing I'm focused on right now. And Kentucky is set to get $1 billion in opioid abatement settlement funds over the next 14 to 16 years. Some of it's already been allocated. And I think this is where the work that we all do individually is so important, to make sure the voices of people in recovery are the center of that and what that looks like. And so right now on a local level, our county judge executives, mayors, fiscal courts have control of that money. Just to give a little bit of reference to people on the call who may not be familiar, that the funds were separated in a 50-50 split, where the state has control of 50% of the funds, and that's a grant making process where you'll apply and they'll grant the money out to the organizations. The other 50% has gone to our local officials to deem where they think it's necessary and what needs to be used. And of the pillars of work, enforcement is not one of them. So this money cannot be used for any type of enforcement. And I think it's hard for people on the government level to understand that the policing our way out has not worked, and what does it look like for our communities going forward? What's the best use of these funds? And so I think all the work that we do, this is an important part of it. And so I kind of want John to speak on, because we have worked a little together about how and this also comes into Gwen's work too, though, because I think, providing a place of second chance employer, that's the kind of environment that fosters confidence and stability. And somebody new to recovery, they're not going to be able to go advocate for themselves right out of the gate. I mean, 6 months into recovery, I would have not done this. I would have not thought my voice had a place in the room. I would have not been confident to use my voice. And so I think Gwen is providing that space for folks to get that kind of confidence back. But John, I want you to speak on some of the conversations that we have had about folks in recovery showing up in those rooms, showing up to the physical court meetings, showing up in Frankfort to talk to the abatement commission, and how important that is for those voices to be in the room, and what that means for this money.
So, as someone in recovery, what our community needs to realize is that we have to get the mindset, nothing about us without us. That money is from our friends and loved ones' lives. That is blood money. That money is not made to pave a street. We need folks with experience from the opioid crisis to be part of how we spend these funds. So local advisory groups, I say this at every opioid abatement meeting I can get my feet into. We need to have local advisory groups, and on those advisory groups, we need to have people who went through the opioid crisis or in recovery from that. Don't get me wrong, I think everyone's recovery matters, but in this part, I don't think that someone who's just recovering from an alcohol addiction, or someone who, say, might have had a heroin addiction in the early 70s is, the person that we need with the lived experience in this instance. We need someone who went through this, big pharma opioid crisis,
Mhm.
and came out the other side. And we need that lived experience to help folks who have only ever used law enforcement as a means to conquer substance use disorder. And apparently, they haven't looked at the data for the last 50 years. We haven't made a dent in it. But, um, you know, when we just spoon feed, our communities, law enforcement, then that's all they think of as a solution. And that creative piece goes away. We have to get very creative in some of the ways that we do this. And the groundwork's already there. People have done the work. We just have to fund it, and people need, I think people need to know where these funds are going. We need to make sure that every penny of this money is transparent. I think everyone in the state of Kentucky, no matter where you live, deserves to know where every single penny of this opioid funding is spent, whether it's on a state level, whether it's on a local level. I do not care. But for my friends and loved ones who have died due to the opioid crisis, I deserve to know how this money's being spent. I deserve to have a voice in how this money's being spent. And so does anyone else who has lost a loved one or a friend or a family member to this crisis, or someone who has went through this crisis. Our voices do matter. And I need my recovery community to understand that, like, your voice does matter. Show up. The first time that we spoke on that this year, Mandy, what was it? 4 of us that showed up to speak. We learned about it like a couple weeks prior, and it's like, we got to go. Who else is going to show up? No one showed up but us. But I'm glad we did. We got to say our piece. We got to talk about the importance of having those advisory boards and being transparent in spending, and making sure that we're spending this money in the right way and not trying to buy police cruisers and canine dogs. That's not what this money's for. This money is for prevention and for treatment, and folks can say what they want about the big H, big R harm reduction, but it saves lives. I don't care how someone feels about it personally, it saves lives. Everything from giving someone, personal hygiene products on the street to making sure they have clean use supplies, whether that be clean syringes, clean snorting supplies, whatever that may be. But, that's part of it. We need to make sure that we're getting those resources into our communities. And these funds can do that. And that's what they're designed for. People can't recover if they're dead. So, that harm reduction prevention part of it, that that's the piece that a lot of folks don't like to talk about, because that's not the pretty piece of it. That's not the shiny recovery treatment piece of it that everyone sees, that, has been so diluted with Medicaid fraud. But that harm reduction piece is that first initial piece that people always leave out, but that's how we get folks. That's how we keep them alive, and that's the goal of this. We need folks to stay alive. We can't do anything with someone if they're dead. Whether that be, get them help or whatever that may be, but that's not just going to ruin one life. That one life is attached to so many others. It's the same way with incarceration that Becky was speaking on earlier. That's not just one person. When someone ODs, it's not just their life. It affects so many others around them, and people forget that part. The 2 most written off populations in America are the folks who are incarcerated and people who use drugs. We are not treated as human, and we have to change that. And I think we use these funds, do it the right way, and show folks that, people who use drugs are good people. We just need help. We're not bad people. We're sick people, and that's the difference. And we use these funds to make sure we don't go through this again. That's the key to this. These funds aren't made to fill in gaps in a budget. These funds are made that we don't go through this opioid crisis again. And I want to do everything I can to make sure we don't experience the same thing that we went through for the past 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and I bring this up because I hope that Kentucky's not the only state that got this money. I mean, this is a regional thing because we are and we're ground zero. And so I bring this up in the hopes that, attendees or people who watch this after the fact will look at who are making the decisions in their community on how this money is spent and what it's being spent on, and be advocates. Even if you're not someone with lived experience, maybe you were, I don't know that there's anybody that's not been touched by this, in some way, that you've had a loved one. You've got some kind of experience with substance use disorder, and being that voice in the room. And John was mentioning the fact that 4 of us showed up for public comment on wanting transparency on the local level. I think they rolled out a great, on a state level, it was great. On a local level, not so much. There's no transparency on how this money is being spent. And there were 4 of us in the room. But I do think we're being heard, though. I think we're establishing a relationship and are respected by the Abatement Commission. Would you agree, John? I mean, I think that's, even though there were only 4 of us. So I think about what a room full of people could do, because they're listening. They're willing.
They really want to hear from us on how
They
this
really do. Yeah. I mean,
this funds, and they want that. They want that piece, that lived experience piece. They want the folks who, have been through the trenches to help them figure out how to spend this money the best way without doing, causing harm and just wasting these funds like we did our tobacco settlement. So
I want to get to Becky because she's got her hand raised. Go ahead, Becky.
Brenda, I'm sorry, because I was about to come out of my chair.
Do it.
Because I got a little stuff to say about the opioid abatement funding. Historically, anytime funding comes into this area, it's the same people that get it and the same people that, get to make the decisions about where that money is spent. And squandered, right? Or worse yet, it's just they use that money to continue to oppress the people in this region. The same people that, ran big coal. When coal ran out, they got into the disability, into the disability arena. When the disability thing started drying up, they were like, oh gosh, how are we going to make money? Oh, I know. We can build a bunch of treatment centers and build a government. And this is happening in all of your local communities. There's a particular, this isn't Kentucky, but it's also Appalachian, Eastern Kentucky. In Williamson, West Virginia, you've got folks who are billing the state for sober living and treatment centers, and they own the whole thing. So they just recycle people through their program. This happens in Kentucky all the time. And then they'll say, oh gosh, we're gonna train you for a new career. And then they use these people as cheap labor to continue to run their treatment centers. And we all know who I'm talking about. I don't have to mention names. Everybody knows, but at what point are we as the people in Eastern Kentucky and Appalachia going to stand up to these folks who basically just carry a last name that everybody recognizes? When are we going to stand up and say, you know what? No, you're not going to treat my daughter that way. No, you're not going to treat my brother that way. My husband, they deserve treatment for their disease as opposed to being criminalized. And so part of that is breaking the stigma. But guys, we've got to, the only way to get other folks in recovery to participate and to use their voices is for us to use our voices and to use them in such a way that there is integrity and authenticity behind the things that we are saying, because those are the things that make us relatable. Those are the things that inspire other people to go do their own work. I was listening to a panel one day and somebody said on this panel, I'm so sick of hearing about the Eastern Kentucky opioid crisis. I'm sick of hearing about it too, friends.
But also we've got this opioid abatement funding, and it's very performative to talk about the opioid crisis in Eastern Kentucky, but we still don't have drop-in centers. We still don't have syringe exchanges, very rarely. We still don't have access to Narcan. And when you try to give people access to Narcan, the community bucks up against you because they have been taught and they believe that that is enabling. All it enables is breathing in and out. And so I feel like we really need to crush this shame culture, because people in recovery today, they've been convinced, they've been shamed and convinced and confined in their families and in their communities as like that's the child we don't talk about. That's the black sheep. And so in all of that time, we build this trauma, and we think we don't deserve to use our voices, that nobody would want to hear what we have to say anyway, or we don't deserve to have a say-so in how money is spent because we spent our money on the wrong things previously. But the fact of the matter is nobody should have a say in how that money is spent but us. Yep, that's it.
Amen. I think that's a good segue for Gwen to talk about her work and well, particularly how this is another extractive industry. And I think Becky summed that up beautifully, that we are watching another extractive industry at work here. It just happens to be big pharma and not the coal industry. And so, yeah, Gwen, let's talk about a little about, I mean, I think that tees you up to talk about changing the narrative about folks in recovery, what it means to empower people to find their voice, all the things that black sheep is doing, that the black sheep can make a difference.
Well, you know, while I was listening to what has already been said, my mind kept going to what's in the national news right now about Letcher County. And that opioid abatement money has been put in the hands of the people in that courthouse who have been perpetuating this human trafficking. I mean, it's nothing short of human trafficking that has been going on there for years. 20 years ago, I was going in the jail with the jail ministry, and I would scare the people in the church to death when it would be prayer service, and they would say, and I have a hard time talking about this without crying, but I would get up and I would say, pray for the inmates, because there is human trafficking going on in that jail. That was 20 years ago. And it was going on before I found out about it. So this crisis, this money has been put in the hands of the people who have been perpetuating this thing. And that's not a popular, I could die tonight for saying that. That is not, what I just said is not popular. It was not popular in that church because it scared them to death, because retaliation is a real thing. It's a real thing in Letcher County. But somebody has to say it. Now, there's some people who are capitalizing on this thing through TikTok and podcasts and everything else. There are people who are capitalizing on this and perpetuating hillbilly stereotypes. And I don't appreciate that. But something has to be said and done about this, because that opioid abatement money is being used for political purposes. And I'll hush about that.
No, you're exactly right. And I think that's why it's important to, I think it's, well, I was going to say more important now than ever, but that's not true either. But to mobilize these grassroots efforts, to get all the voices we can involved, because I think if you do have a room where 4 people show up
If you have
just not
4,000 show up, they're gonna listen.
right. And I think it's a lot harder at that point then for the retaliation or and I just don't, I think it's tough. It's tough um, to mobilize people. And because there has been a culture of fear established here that when people rise up, it's usually, it's not good. It's usually not good for those folks. Um, so I think I
And
also
I
want,
might add, one other reason that it's scary here is this building is owned by the fiscal court.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. And I think that's true for every community. Like the hands that are um guiding this money also have their hands in so many other things. And that's the dangers. And that's why I feel like, and that's one of the reasons why we went to speak to the Opioid Abatement Commission, was to say, if you have put this money in the hands of people, and then with no transparency and no tracking, like I mean, these are the people that have been known to squander our money for years. And we ask that we need local level abatement commissions. Have a committee of people, so it's not just on the fiscal court or the county judge executive to spend this money, that there is a commission of people who are lived experience, the faith organizations. So you have multiple people in the community making these decisions on how this money is spent. I
I
think, go ahead.
Making sure that you learn when your local funding discussions are happening. They're supposed to be open to the public. This is public funds. You know, so when they go to talk about this money or to spend this money, we have the civic duty to be there. I'll put it that way. We have to show up and show up in those rooms because we deserve to be there as well. It's time for us to step forward. As scary as it may be, it's now or never. So, because if we don't, we are going to squander this money. We're going to let them squander this money the way that they squander every other thing, and that don't sit right with me. There's too many people that died to get this damn money. This isn't our regular tax money that they squander every single day. This is blood money, and we need to make sure that's spent right. So, I'm gonna keep showing up to as many meetings as I can, and I'm gonna try to get as many people to show up at their local meetings as possible, and talk about the importance of each local, community being transparent on how they spend these funds, because I think, families of folks who have passed away from this disease deserve the right to know how that money's being spent because it came off the life of their loved one. So I will not change.
Well, and I also just want to note that this is a settlement. So we have been advised on how we can spend this money. And if we don't spend it according to the agreement of the settlement, there's potential that it will be that money will be pulled and we won't have it. And so I think that's also should be noted. And when we talk about how to spend it, I almost shift gears just a little bit because this could be the whole discussion. But along those lines, if you could give advice as organizers, as if you could give advice to communities that are beginning these organizing efforts or hear this conversation and all of a sudden get interested in being like, where is that money being spent in my community? Do you have any advice on what that would look like? What organizing, like where can people start in their community?
Start with Kentucky Association of Counties website. They have all kinds of resources on there for communities, and they have a guide on like, what what this funding can be spent for and what it can't be spent for. So they tell you straight up, and their website's free. You know, there's folks going around trying to do consulting on this. Look, I'm for everyone making their funds, but I don't think consulting fees should come out of this fund. If you want to bring it out of a general fund, that's fine. If you want to have someone tell you how to spend or help you spend these funds, if you want to pay them for that, pay them out of your general fund. Don't pay them out of our opioid settlement funds. But you know, if folks can educate themselves through like Keiko's website and use their resources and figure out, you know, what's allowable, what's not. You know, don't take my word for it. I want folks to look it up themselves so that they know. You know, because I think we have that issue in this country right now. We're taking too many people's words for things. Let's do our own research. Let's form our own ideas. That's how we build power. You know, but yeah, I think folks just learning, you know, what's allowable, what's not, what's a good use of these funds and what's not, and learning out when their local funding hearings are and showing up to City Hall and like, hey, I want to know where you're spending our funds. Do we have a local advisory group? Who's on our local advisory group? How does one apply to this local advisory group? You know, and we have to be able to get involved in these issues, you know, and this one's an important one. So, you know, that's my call to action for people. You know, get involved in your local area and find out how this money's being spent, and you know how you can voice your opinion, whether that be through the fiscal court meeting or whatever. You know, there's always they always have to have a space for some kind of public comment or something in some meetings. You know, they'll let you speak. So find one that they'll let you speak at and speak. But yeah, and if you're in the state of Kentucky and you want to learn more about this, feel free to contact me. I'm actually going to be doing some events across the state and doing workshops on local opioid funding for folks, and what that looks like, and you know who's in control of it, how to go about finding, you know, when folks are meeting, where resources are. So you know, and I think that's a vital piece that our communities need is the education piece on things like that, because you know, folks don't tell us things like that for a reason. They don't want us to know. So, you know, it's on us to educate our community members around these things. So, you know, hopefully I can do a good job at educating some of our community members and help them find their voice on speaking out on how these funds are being spent. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Gwen, Becky, do you guys have any?
Oh, I got one. Because I did this yesterday. And I think it's something that a lot of people don't mention. It's not even John's answer or like a leap off of John's answer. My favorite thing, so for me, like I got to get motivated and I have to get mad about a thing. I'm really mad about this whole recovery sober living thing in Williamson, in case you couldn't tell. And so my favorite thing to do when I'm already a little mad, but I need to get good and mad, is to go to the state website, the Secretary of State website, and start looking at where the money's going, whose name is on that LLC, whose name is on that nonprofit. You will find it. Like you will find all of the Beckett's and the Robinsons and a list of their endeavors on that website, and you can see where the money's going. You don't even have to really try that hard. But that's how I get good and mad. And once I get good and mad, there's no stopping it.
Thanks, Becky.
Pray for me.
Mm-hmm.
I like to get good and mad and write an op-ed. That's what I like to do. I like to get good and pissed off and then write about it, and then maybe somebody will run it. How about you, Gwen? You got any advice for anybody who's beginning, who's wants to organize?
I just think that the grassroots support, with or without money, you know, because God knows, it's been without money here. But I think the grassroots, boots on the ground, love one another, knowing that in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, as nerdy as that might be, right above food, water, air, and warmth is love and belonging. And without love and belonging, we can't thrive, you know. And you got to have love and belonging before you can self actualize up there at the top of the hierarchy. So I just think that there have to be third spaces. There have to be places that everybody might not agree about what somebody's doing, but that there's acceptance and that people are able to feel like that they can speak and be respected, and that they can fit in. And you know, I've seen so many people just treated like animals and passed over, when, you know, they're a human being. They're somebody's daughter, somebody's son. They're, you know, they're somebody that deserves love. I think a basic, you know, I mean, it's just part of the basic human rights, if you look at that. And I think that people in recovery are not treated that way for the most part. And, you know, John said nothing about us without us. You know, for decades, we've had people come into to the Appalachian mountains and tell us what they thought we should have instead of asking us what we need. And so I think instead of saying, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this for you, I think that individuals should be asked, what do you need from us? You know, I think that is the most important part of this whole thing that I do not think county government can administer. I think that is, I mean, they could, but will they? No, because they're worried about the next vote. You know, I'm gonna do you a favor so your family will vote for me when it comes election. I mean, it's so corrupt. The very root of it is corrupt. You know, I ran for mayor down in Neon. I guess it's been about probably 12, 14 years ago. I was appalled. You know, I didn't have any money to spend. I maybe spent $40 on some cards, you know, and little signs, because I just wanted the town to improve. That's all I wanted. It was so corrupt. I was appalled. I was like, I am never running for political office. Oh my God, it's the dirtiest thing in the world. And, you know, I don't know if it's that way everywhere, but it definitely is in Letcher County. It's so dirty. And the political machine, you know, goes back decades, certain families and all that. I mean, it's just the awfulest mess in the world.
It feels pretty dirty all around right now, actually. Um, well, guys, we're at the end. I don't know if we have any questions in the chat. And I think, Gwen, that's a good place to stop. I think, you know, I don't know that even our basic needs are being met in this region. I mean, you know, and until we get there, you know, we can strive for the love in the community part, but I also think we need to focus on just the food and the water part, the basic part.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good stopping point and being mindful of how important those third spaces are and community.
Yeah, thank you, Mandy. And thank you to all of y'all, John, Becky, and Gwen. If you're in the room with us, please feel free to drop some emojis or kind words of appreciation for our speakers in the chat. But thanks y'all so much for this incredible conversation, and most importantly, for your hearts and the good work that you do in the world. And thanks for all of y'all who watched with us live in the room or were joining us watching live from the lobby. This ends our festival today. So we had 217 folks join us this week, and we will be reaching out in the coming weeks with resources for staying connected. And we encourage all of y'all, if you can, to attend one of the after parties tonight. We have them going in Kentucky, Ohio, Virginia, and West Virginia. There's going to be free pizza, free food. I even heard there's going to be some slam poetry and karaoke at some of these. So come on out if you can. Those details are on the website, and I'm going to drop that in the chat right now. So thank y'all for coming, and for this panel, thank y'all so much. We are really honored to have y'all here today for this conversation, and we will see you hopefully tonight.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Hey.
Thank